Hello again, fifth graders. How are you? Have you been dreaming of being on an island? I would love being on a beach right now with the waves coming in. But I'm not so sure I would like to be in the swamp nor up in the mountains climbing. I wonder what is going to happen today in our story, Washed Up. Today, our learning intentions are we are going to learn to identify academic words specific to the text. We'll do this by using context clues to determine the meaning of words as used in the text. And we will be successful as we use the words in conversation and discussion in the correct context or meaning. We're also learning to compare and contrast two or more characters, settings, or events in a story. We'll do this by identifying and using specific details from the story. And we will be successful when we create a graphic organizer describing the similarities and differences of characters and their actions. And we are also going to learn to determine a theme of a story. We will identify the theme by using details in the text and how characters respond to challenges. We'll be successful when we write statements about those characters and their actions. Our first vocabulary word is predicted. It's located at the top of page 18. The word is predict, which means the root word, is predict. It means to foretell what is going to happen or guess what will happen. By adding the suffix ed, we make the word predicted, which is past tense. It already was guessed or stated what would happen in the future. A synonym for predicted would be anticipated or maybe expected. How would you use predicted in a sentence? What picture comes to mind when you think of the word predicted? I think of future having been told, so I have added a picture of someone holding the word future. Now let's look at teaming. The root word is team. It's not like a group of people like on a football team. That's spelled differently, but has a different meaning also. We call them homophones. The teeming means overflowing or is full of. So here I have a picture of a glass of water, and the glass is overflowing with water, which would mean it is teeming with water, not the teaming, as in a group of people playing together. This is the graphic organizer we will be completing today to help us describe the characters in the story. In this lesson, we are going to learn how readers use facts, definitions, and concrete details to explain the understanding of the text. Chapter 2. As I predicted, in so little time, so much has changed. Perhaps Fairy Blue is referring to her hairdo, woven with leaves to make her look like a forest nymph. Now the Walpoles were on the TV screen and they didn't cut as pretty a picture. Mrs. Walpole had just emitted a blood-curdling cry that shook the forest to its roots after a spider had used her hand as a landing pad. I have underlined two words in this text. Did you see them? I bet you saw them before I did. So how did you figure out what they meant? Remember, good readers won't just skim or skip over words they don't know, but they will use context clues to help identify the meaning. So, how would you define nymph and emitted? We need a fire to keep creepy crawlies away, said Mr. Walpole frantically. Oliver inhaled deeply. Dad, the matches are all wet. Oh, great. Let's play the blame game, said Harvey Walpole. Your mother was half drowning in the waves, and you wanted me to think about the matches? The water they'd waded through to come ashore had only been knee deep, but Oliver bit his lip. This was probably not the best time to make a point. It's too sticky for a fire anyway, said Mrs. Walpole, lifting one perfectly arched eyebrow. And it makes my hair frizz. So, why did Mrs. Walpole think it was too sticky for a fire? Yes, she was thinking it was too hot and muggy. Have you ever been on a tropical island? The weather is humid and sticky, but that means there's moisture in the air. What do you think will happen when the sun goes down since there's moisture in the air? Will the atmosphere change? Hmm, I wonder if they really will need a fire, but Mrs. Walpole isn't thinking about that. Let's go on. Oliver said nothing. He was looking at the jungle canopy towering above them like a 30-story building. Up, it seemed the only way to escape a forest floor teeming with bugs was to go up, but the thought of it made him a little lightheaded. He stared at the buttress roots propping up the tallest trees and masses of vines and creepers that looked like spaghetti. The thought of food made Oliver's stomach rumble. The creepers weren't, but they were as thick as a man's arm. I think I read that wrong. Let's go back and look at that again. The creepers weren't for eating, but they were as thick as a man's arm, twisting and twining up to the sun. Maybe they had other uses. Let's make a camp, he shouted. We can cut these creepers and build somewhere to sleep. I'll handle that, said Mr. Walpole gallantly, and Oliver heaved an inward sigh of relief. The family spat had been postponed, at least for now. I'm going to go back to this page, and I did not underline it, but I want you to think about the canopy. It said he was looking at the jungle canopy towering above them like a 30-story building. I wonder what canopy is defined as in this sense and in the text. Challenge. However, we do have the word teeming, and that is one of our vocabulary words. When we discussed this word at the beginning of the lesson, we used a picture of glass of water overflowing. It is not referring to a glass of water here, is it? What is overflowing in the text? Why do you think the author used that word to describe the setting? I believe it does create a more vivid or better picture in your mind as you think of so many bugs. It sure would for me. Now let's go back to the next page where we read it on. So I want you to think about this. We did finish this page, and there were some conditions on the island that are affecting the Walpole family. What are they? How are they affecting them? Where in the text tells you this? That's right. The Walpoles, especially Mr. and Mrs. Walpole, are not comfortable with nature, are they? How do we know this? They are not prepared. The text told us that. They are not prepared. What from the text tells you this? There were many things, correct? For instance, what about Mrs. Walpole and not being able to get out of a very low level of water and needing help? Think about it. Let's go on. When you look at this, what do you think Oliver is looking at? How do you think that view makes him feel? And why do you think that? Our text did tell us that he was thinking about having to move up. Let's go on. Whoa, we have a leaf. Did you notice? That's right. It means a change. Let's see what the change is. Mr. Garcia was also looking up, which explained why his foot got caught in a mess of tangled roots. His ankle throbbed painfully, but his heart jumped. Water, food, fuel, and shelter. That was it. Coconut palms, said Gabriella, feeling thankful for these drift seeds that had traveled across oceans and on currents to take root on this remote island. She shot her father a worried look as he extricated his foot, wincing. Are you okay, Papa? Okay, I'm going to stop for a minute because I want you to look at that second paragraph again. There was a lot of description in there, but I really want you to think about what was that description of? Let's read that paragraph again. Coconut palms, said Gabriella, feeling thankful for these drift seeds that had traveled across oceans and on currents to take root on this remote island. Guys, did you notice? She was looking at coconut trees. She wasn't looking at the coconuts. She was looking at the coconut trees. And then, in her mind, she was thankful because these seeds from coconut trees somewhere else had traveled across the ocean in the waves and with the tide and had been planted by nature on this island to grow up to be big trees. She's thankful for them. I wonder why. And then she looked at her father and she was worried. You saw them. The words. There were two words I underlined, extricating and wincing. I am sure you used the context clues to help you know he was taking his foot out of the tangled roots. But it hurt. There was a flash of pain when he did so, and his face showed pain. So, extricated would mean removing his foot, and wincing would be showing a flash of pain on his face. That's right. What else do you notice about the Garcias? Do they seem to be prepared for this? Why or why not? He nodded, although a red hot flash of pain surged through his leg as they trudged forward, the mud clenching around their feet. The tide was coming in faster than they'd expected, submerging their swampy jetty and threatening to overcome them. Sprained ankle or not, they would have to keep moving, even if every movement was excruciatingly slow. They clambered to dry land as the tide rose higher. We'll slash palm trees together for our shelter here, said Gabriella, recalling all the survival adventures she'd watched on TV and read about in books. They made it look so easy. So there is a landform term here that I would like you to recognize. It is called a jetty. Based on how it is used, the tide was coming in faster than they'd expected, submerging their swampy jetty and threatening to overcome them. So, what do you think a jetty is? It is the area in which they are located, so it's not just a swamp, but it is a small piece of land or a structure that sticks up out of the water. That tells me they were on some dry land, but it wasn't going to be high enough to keep them from the tide and getting wet. She noticed that too, realizing they still needed to move on. Another question, just quick. How do we know Gabriella knows how to do all of these things? Has she experienced it before? What does the text tell you? Save some palm fronds for the ground to insulate us, she said, and saw the agreement on her father's face. Then he looked away. Gabriella's father had never stepped out of the little town where he was born, and now they were in a mangrove swamp. There would be rising tides and hungry crocodiles, as well as the leeches and snakes that she hoped the palm fronds would protect them from. Gabriella was glad she didn't have to spell it out for him. So, what value do the palm fronds have for Gabriella and her father, according to Gabriella? Use text evidence to prove it. Now, let's think of the characters and how we would describe them. This should help us begin identify a theme in the story because recognizing how characters respond to challenges will help guide us to identify a common theme throughout the story. Let's look at the Walpoles. We know there are three in the family here on the island. We have Mrs. Walpole, Mr. Walpole, and their son Oliver. On page 18, we saw that Mrs. Walpole is extremely afraid of spiders. How did we know that? That's right, she emitted or let out a blood curdling cry when a spider landed on her. I have typed afraid of spiders under Mrs. Walpole in the graphic organizer. Now it's your turn. What else could we say about Mrs. Walpole? That's right, she needed help getting out of the shallow water. Even though it was not deep, she still had to have help. That tells me she does not know much about nature or being around in it. Good. There is one more, and that is she is vain. Vanity is the noun for vain, the verb, and it means to care more about your looks, and in this case, bit more about your looks than being safe. In other words, she's very proud and arrogant about what she looks like and who she is. Very good. Now you are going to do the same thing describing Mr. Walpole and then Oliver. Make sure you go back to the text to help you do this. I also have a challenge for you. Create your own chart for the other two families in the stories and write their character descriptions. All right, so here is what we have done. We've learned to identify academic words specific to the text, and we've used context clues to determine their meanings. We need to continue having conversations and discussions using those terms correctly as we use them. We have also learned to compare and contrast two or more characters in the story. We haven't really compared and contrasted the settings, but think about it. How are some of the settings that our characters are in the same? How are they different? Even though they're all on the same island, there are some differences, aren't there? We have identified and used specific details to show how they are similar and different. So this is where you will continue by creating a graphic organizer and describing their similarities and differences of the characters and their actions. We've also started thinking about these, and we're going to use them to determine the theme of the story. We have identified the theme by using details in the text in the past, and that's how we will do it, as well as how the characters are responding to challenges. You will be successful by writing statements describing the characters and their actions. I predict you will do a great job. Way to go! Here are the resources I've used to do this lesson. Bye.